Yo, yo, yo. Can you hear me now? Got a lot going on over here. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello, 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 hello. All right. Can you guys hear me out there? Can you guys hear me out there? Yes, now we cooking. All right. First and foremost, let me go ahead and get back to my intro. So the King Midas will be here momentarily. All right, the King will be here momentarily. He has some things that he needed to take care of real quick, so he'll be joining us shortly. So, first and foremost, you guys know by now, they call me Phil Jones or Mike Jones, however you guys know me personally or professionally, the host of the Extraordinary Man podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in with us yet again for another exciting episode of the Extraordinary Man podcast. So, see, I told you it was going to be shortly. Look at that handsome face right there. Can't hear you. He getting it together. All right. So last week we had a conversation with you guys about, well, not last week, but last time we were live, we had a conversation with you guys about communication. When it comes down to communication, what is communication? It is our ability to be able to get points across from one person to the next effectively and try to make sure that the core root of what it is that we're trying to get across is conveyed as often as humanly possible. Is that always possible? Most times it is. It depends on how bad you really want to communicate. A lot of times we need to know our audience. We need to know who we're talking to. We need to know what we're talking to them about. Other times we need to make sure that there's a reciprocative motion going on to where whatever it is that I'm saying, you actually really want to understand what it is that I'm saying. And you have to also make sure that you're doing the listening so that you can properly assess what's being said to you. Midas has this term called the habitual point misser. What is the habitual point misser?
PPM.
PPM. Can you please break down the PPM for me, man?
Professional point misser. Is somebody that and it falls under the realm of the need to be right, always needing to be right. Somebody that is playing it's a number of things. So they like to play stupid, or they try to always have this need to be right, but it's someone that always goes out of their way to make sure that they don't understand what you're talking about, no matter how many examples you give, no matter how many statistics you give, no matter how much data that you can garnish to show this person that what you are saying is absurd. They still go out of their way to try to make sure that they don't understand what you are talking about.
You know, there's one thing about that term. There's one thing about that term that is like it does something for me. A bit like the point misser. Hold on, I'm getting adjusted here.
Yeah, I was gonna say swap them.
You said what?
Swap. You did it already.
Yeah, I'm not accustomed to wearing headphones during the broadcast. So you guys got to work with me a little bit. So when it comes down to that concept of missing a point all the time, it's like I get accused of this a lot. And there's times to where it's like I will completely bypass the point to point out the irrelevancy of what's being said. See, I call that selective hearing. To me, that is the difference between hearing and listening. I could jail with that. I could,
Yeah,
I could jail with that.
yeah. Because you want to know what's the key factor in the difference between hearing and listening is the comprehension. You heard me. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you listening, but are you hearing me for real? Are you really comprehending what I'm saying for real?
Do you have a desire to truly have an understanding of what's being said to you? Or are
Mhm.
you literally just listening for either listening to respond, or do you really don't care what I have to say because you're already married to a specific idea or thought process? So therefore, this is literally a waste of my time and yours to go ahead with this conversation. And one of the bad parts is the fact that a lot of us we have such a desire for understanding or a desire to be understood and to understand, and then people will deprive us of that intentionally with malicious intention just to throw us off of a conversation. And anything I would say is more so like a communication tactic. And I don't necessarily know why people do it. I don't necessarily know why I have done it. I think that sometimes it's just really is most times when you don't have anything of value to bring to the conversation. So you deflect.
I think so. And I mean, I really would like to bring up the fact that, and I hope everybody's heard the story, but we don't argue with donkeys. You got to recognize when you're talking to one and just leave it at that. You know what, bruh? You know what? You got it. You good.
You know, I've been a donkey quite a few times in my lifetime. And one thing is that I like to tell people that the best measure or the best means of dealing with self is always to be honest with who I am or be honest with who I have portrayed myself as, because you don't get better by trying to convince yourself what you want to hear. And I've learned over the years that the best thing that I could ever do in this lifetime is put myself in a situation to where I can have a clear view of who I am. And one of the things that you really need, and it's like anybody who goes around spouting and spewing, I don't care what other people think about me, that is scary to me, because one of the four pillars of communication is having an understanding of how the world sees you. So the
Yeah.
person that I may see in the mirror or the person that I may desire to be, I may think that I'm projecting the traits or the habits or the outward appearance of the person I want people to see me as. But then in reality, the version of me is really off putting and is doing the complete opposite of what it is I want to do. But instead of gaining an understanding about how people see me versus how I see myself so I can connect the dots and make the adjustments, instead, I'd rather deflect and make it your fault. If you don't like what you see, then it's your problem. You need to figure that out for yourself, because I'm me and I'm going to be me, whoever. That mentality only goes so far.
Yeah.
See, I wouldn't call the donkeys. I call them mules. A donkey is just silly and funny, and mules are stubborn. When I'm being a donkey, I trust in my partner to guide me to the best situation for us. I trust him explicitly.
And I get that, and you definitely right, Ashley and Jose. Y'all both correct. Uh, However, the story, the way that the story is explained is with the donkey.
Tell the
But
story. Tell the story.
okay, so the story is the donkey, and I believe it was was it a cheetah?
I think it was a tiger The donkey, or it's like
Right, right. It was a tiger and a donkey. Okay, so the tiger and the donkey was arguing over what color the grass was. And the donkey was saying that the grass is one color, and the tiger was saying that the grass is what the color the grass is. So they argued back and forth. And so they was like, all right, well, we're gonna take this in front of the king. And the donkey, you know what I'm saying, they both walk over to the king, which is the lion, and the donkey presents his case, you know, uh your honor, you know, I'm trying to tell the tiger here that the grass is this color. He refuses to believe that the grass is this color, and he needs to be punished. And the king goes, well, then the tiger will be punished. And the donkey, you know what I'm saying, runs away laughing, you know, he ha ha and all that. And then the tiger goes, but your honor, me and you both know that the grass is this color. Why would you punish me? And he said, I'm punishing you because you arguing with a fool. If you know that the grass is this color, why are you wasting your time, efforts, and energy talking to this idiot? And that's basically the moral of the story. You got to recognize when you talking to a donkey. That's why I said, you know what, bro? It's you got it. You right. It's cool. Good talk, bro.
sometimes, and that's one of the parts of the how to know if your communication needs work is that sometimes one of the biggest problems is the need to be right. Is that I will argue up and down. I know many people, like depending on your age group, you've heard the phrase that wise people never argue with fools because from a distance you can't tell who's who.
Hmm.
Realistically, there's no need for me to prove a point that I know the answer to. If I tell you 2 + 2 is 4 and you are explicitly believing or explicitly arguing me saying, well, there could be other factors. Well, in my opinion, there is. At that point in time, I know that I know consciously that there is nothing of value going to come out of this conversation. When you want to tell me 2 + 2 is 17, clearly we know that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
How many apples, Steve? How many apples? Come on, we know better. A lot of times we have this desire to be right, or we have this desire to, God, how do I phrase this appropriately? We have this desire to be triumphant in minuscule tasks.
Mm. Mm.
There's no need to be the undisputed champion of thought. There's no need to prove points sometimes. And in proving points, a lot of times when we get into arguments not necessarily because of the big picture. We get into arguments because of the small nuances surrounding the big picture. Anybody that's watching, show of hands in any capacity. If you think about the last argument that you had, the root of that argument was probably something, but when you started dialing back what the actual argument escalated from, was it or was it not something stupid? I dare anybody tell me that when they sit there and they think about the last thing they argued about, like, yeah, we were having a conversation about something, and then he said this, then I said that, and he got triggered by it. Yes and no. You basically saying yes.
Mm-hmm.
We generally don't
Mm-hmm.
argue about the big points. We argue about, like, we don't argue about religion. We argue about the way that we believe. Because to argue about a religion, the large picture is that there's something bigger than us. The small nuances of how you choose to practice, or what you call the deity, or where you go to do it, or the origin of this, and this. The small point is the why, the what, the when the big picture is, do you believe in something larger than yourself? Yes.
Yeah, I call that the Kevin Hart theory, where he talked about how juice, something as small as juice, can become a huge problem. When you got time in, and Jose, you bring up a really good point as far as you said you could take a horse to the river, but you can't force him to drink. That actually opens up a different line of communication, because again, we're talking about someone, with the capacity to be able to provide information, convey it in a way that you think that person can comprehend. You're not giving them a whole entire 72-ounce steak. You start them off with the 4-ounce, then you graduate them to the 6-ounce, then you graduate them to the 12-ounce. You know what I'm saying? And that person still just doesn't seem to want to comprehend, or maybe they do, but then that turns into a level of laziness, which is a whole nother conversation. But just the fact that people is hearing what's being said to them, and then they're not doing nothing with that information, you know and it could be a lack of comprehension, which I think a lot of times in a lot of conversations, when things get taken out of context, is because the level of comprehension isn't up to par these days.
You know, I have proven this on countless occasions that depending on what you subscribe to in life plays a big role in how you perceive things. Like the last time when it was me, you, and Marvin on here, we were just going through words and dictionaries. As you know, I'm a Mr. Google search. I like to make sure that what I'm saying makes sense. And a lot of times we have habitually used words out of context or depending on what you apply to. Like, for instance, we talk about business in here a lot. The
Mhm.
word person, as we know it in this world, versus the word person in the business world, have two completely different meanings.
Correct.
So I'm going to just pull it up just as an example. And I want to use this as gaining an understanding of clarity. And I want you guys to just follow along with me here. All right, so I'm going.
Y'all know who I am, man. I got to do it, Mike. I got to do it real
Go
quick.
for it. Hold on. Let me put you up on the big screen. Go ahead.
I am Midas. Make sure you put a king in front of that. Let's go.
All right.
Make sure I got that.
All right, so let me go ahead and put this up here real quick, and I'm just want you guys to follow along with this if y'all don't mind. Let me know if y'all can see my screen.
Yes, it looks good.
Okay, so the definition of a person, a human being regarded as an individual, or number two, a category used to classify, or used as a category used in the classification of pronouns. So that's what the general definition of a person is. Now, let's look at it from this point of view. Person defined in business definition. A person means an individual or corporation, partnership, trust, incorporated or unincorporated association, joint venture, limited liability company, joint stock company, government or an agency or subdivision thereof, or other entity of any kind.
That definition right there. And again, that's a whole nother conversation. But when it comes to the FCRA 15 USC 1681A, when it comes to that law, there should be no reason why anybody's credit is screwed. I just put it. I just That's another conversation. We'll get into it one of these days.
Oh, it's coming.
But
It's coming to a
that,
head in the EU, baby.
that definition right there is a game changer.
So, in legal terms, right? If you hear like in court shows and stuff when they say "we the people," when you hear in politics, not politics, but you hear just in general, like in the foundation of America, when they said "we the people," who were they talking about? Were they talking about we the people as individuals, or we the people as merchant class people with businesses? Who was we? Who were people?
Mhm.
Because I just showed you two completely different definitions for the same word. So when people are communicating and they're saying certain things, you have to understand that the definition isn't just different depending on what religion, or I mean not religion, but like what language you speak. But it's different because there's a language involved in every single thing that you do. There are certain terms that if you are in the world of mathematics, that word means something completely different than what it means out here in the Webster's dictionary. Depending on what world you're involved in, words have a completely different meaning. So when you're thinking about this, when it comes down to contracts, when it comes down to agreements, when it comes down to these things, they understand that you may not be literate in how things are communicated. Dialing that back to the conversation aspect of person to person, depending on what you subscribe to. The English language is such a cluster of language.
It's a dirty language, man.
It's almost criminal. It should almost be criminal because of how many different ways you can say the same thing, and then you have people that are constantly being confused and manipulated because they don't know what they're saying half of the time. Like, what's the last time that you looked up a word, just looked up a word that you say on a regular basis, and then you wonder why when you saying something to somebody and they get offended by it, it could be because their understanding of that word is completely different than yours.
Correct.
Or that phrase could mean something completely different. How we use it in the Midwest may be completely different than how they use it in the South. No different than pop versus soda, gym shoes versus sneakers.
Mm-hmm.
We all talking about the same thing, but we'll have a culture clash when somebody hears one say the other.
You know, Apple, Android.
I will argue, Jose, that people who speak more than one language are actually better suited than people who just speak English. And let me tell you why. When you're learning how to speak English, you are actually practicing the proper use of a language. Whereas in Spanish, you speak the dialect that you speak from where you're from. So therefore, when you're speaking it and when you're using it with local colloquialisms, with area-wide language and other factors that kind of tie into it. But you're not speaking Spanish to understand it because you already speak it. It's native. So you're speaking the version that you know best, but you're not trying to speak it at the level of a Spaniard. But when you're speaking English, you're trying to speak English at the same level of somebody who natively speaks it, which means that you're constantly self-aware, or you're a lot more self-aware of the things that are coming out of your mouth when you're practicing something that's different. Because you're constantly aware of, I don't want to make a mistake. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, you spoke on contracts. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of individuals or persons really getting screwed in their contracts because they don't understand it. They go into a lot of these contracts or reading these contracts, you know, going into it with the state of mind of Webster, Oxford, you know, style of dictionary, when really, and if you could research this real quick, Mike, and pull it up. You need to be going into and sometimes even operating through life with this particular dictionary. Black's Law 11th edition. I do like the 4th edition, but 11th, the 11th edition is the latest one, and that's perfect for anybody that's just getting into it. You can start with the latest one.
I'll pull it up on the screen.
So can you blow up the screen? Like actually increase the you, can you make the you in Safari, right?
No.
Chrome?
Yeah, we don't use Safari around here, cuz.
Got you. So up in the top right corner, you should be able to like increase like the actual like size of Chrome itself. Increase the frame size. But anyway, it does look pretty clear. But anyway, that dictionary right there that he got highlighted, Black's Law Dictionary, the 11th edition, that is the dictionary that you want to use to really thoroughly understand. Yep. That's the dictionary that you want to use to thoroughly understand the English language. Oxford is cool. Webster's cool. They don't have these definitions because these are the definitions that they're putting in contracts. These are the definitions that they're using to onboard you at a job. You know, these are the definitions that they're using to, you know, run through life for real.
You know,
So there you go. So there you go. You know, I think that deserves a bomb. And you know, the bomb for some reason likes to take his time to come in and drop in on us. But that right there, that is a bomb. I just gave you the most second important book ever outside of what style of there it is. Outside of whatever style of Bible that you read, that book comes second to any other book.
And we say this in understanding that no matter what you take part in, you have to understand that every activity has a sub language. Sports has a sub language. There are terms that are used in sports that in one area of the world mean something completely different than they mean in this activity. And if you don't understand the language by which you're speaking, you're going to always be confused because it's like you say certain things. For instance, like a goal in soccer is not the same as a goal in basketball. You don't refer to them as the same thing, but they have the same concept. You know, so when it comes down to person interaction, one of the things that I feel like that is hugely important when it comes down to person interaction is the fact that you have to be very intentional about understanding. And you can't walk into a situation automatically assuming that people know what you're talking about. Because one of the most fatal flaws that I've ever made was assuming that people knew or that they should know what I know. Because at the surface level, there's some of us that we are surface level geniuses. We know so much surface level information that we just seem smart to everybody. Like, Jesus, man, this man just knows this, and this. Like, look at him. He just every time that you ask him something, he knows the answer to it. Some of us are surface level geniuses. We absolutely can. We know enough about everything to make ourselves sound smart, and we don't know nothing. We don't know anything. And it is literally at a place in our lives so we have to start looking at things and asking ourselves, what world do we ascribe to? And when we're communicating, what world did they ascribe to? If I'm having a conversation with somebody that's a devout Christian, I understand that there are going to be certain words they're going to use in their oral vernacular that are going to indicate to me that I'm talking to somebody that is involved in the Christian world. They're going to use words like blessed. People in the regular world don't use words like blessed. It just doesn't happen too often unless you're in a religious kind of walk, that you don't use certain things. You don't use certain terms unless you are involved in certain activities. And it's usually a key indicator that when you say certain things to people, that when you hear these verbal cues that let you know that a person is their competency is rooted into a certain area, you have an opportunity to meet them where they are to get a point across. Some of the most effective orators that I've ever seen in my life have taken the time to identify key information about people before they start speaking to them, because then you know how to proceed with conversations. How do I relate this to something that is in the context of what you apply to? And it's not manipulative, it's actually pretty genius to be able to say, okay, I understand that you have a worldview that is rooted in this belief system. Okay, cool. I'm going to use analogies and use certain points that are relative to your thought process because it's easier for you to tie them in to make it make sense. If you're somebody who is into video games, okay, like you're heavy into video games, okay, video game analogies may make it click faster than me talking to you the way that I talk to people that subscribe to what I subscribe to. And I feel
Mhm.
like that's one of the best methods of communication, is meeting somebody where they are and being able to bring it to them in a way that they can understand it.
And it takes somebody, you know, operating at a genius level to really pick up on that and be able to articulate in that manner. I know you said something that kind of hit too, where you said that people, I guess, being on your level, or something along the lines of people being on your level, or thinking that they know what you know, uh basically can read your mind, basically. um I know me and you had this conversation, transparency moment. He kind of had to, we had a conversation the other day, and he kind of had to, saying, pump the brakes on me, because I hit him with an idea, and me thinking in my head, because I was already at the end result of the idea before I presented it to him, that I didn't give him the in between sauce. I didn't tell him, saying the protein that I bought, how I prepared it, the temperature that I'm going to cook it on in the oven. I just gave him the meal. And I think that we got to be real careful with that too, because that right there in itself, you can turn people off, because you may have a wonderful idea, but the way that you communicate it, you didn't articulate it and give enough detail or build up enough excitement around this great idea to get a buy-in on it. So I learned that, saying, he taught me that the other day.
And to that point, is like one of the things is that when you are proficient at something, you have to realize that you have to be proficient at something, that means that you have to be actively in practicing it over large periods of time, to where you have not necessarily perfected something, but you have gotten so good at doing it that it is now, I guess, muscle memory, for the lack of better terminology. So when you are somebody who is a large picture thinker, somebody who is a deep future thinker, and you dealing with people who are very day to day, if you don't know how to dial it back to make it make sense to them, maybe they need to hear things in stages. That you can't come to somebody with a cup that's an 8-ounce cup and you're a whole ocean. And it's like, yo, why can't you comprehend an ocean's worth of information? Because, bro, I can only comprehend an 8-ounce cup, one
Mhm.
cup at a time. Then I got to digest that before you put some more into the cup. You can't just keep pouring, because I can't handle that. A lot of times, what happens is that the tenets of conversation is that it's bigger than you speak, I listen, you speak. Communication is bigger than just having a desire to want to speak or get a point across. Communication requires for people to understand who they're talking to, understand their core competencies, And if you don't understand them, you have to learn them and learn them quickly. So there are things that you learn about people. You should be able to look at somebody's life and look at how they deal with things. Are they savers or are they people who deal with things month by month? If you have certain conversations with people, they'll let you know that they're not really long-term thinkers. So maybe I shouldn't be presenting long-term ideas to them. Knowing it's just like, hey, what's your retirement plan? What is your 5-year goal? Your 10 years? This, then. Oh, I haven't thought about that. Boom! You just let me know that you're somebody who I can't talk distance thinking to because you're not there yet. I am actively in practice of knowing what the next 20 years of my life is supposed to look like because I have
Mhm.
made a habit of preparing myself. And that's the reason why I'm where I am and other people are still scrambling, trying to figure it out at the same age. You have to be able to read what's not being said to understand how to best present an idea to your audience. And that requires you to step outside of yourself and to read the room. I can't go into a place and be married to my idea or married to my thought process of the idea because I will turn people off almost 100% of the time because you're trying to force something without you even realize that you're being forceful. You're trying to force something, you're trying to force people to see it from your point of view as if your point of view is the only one that matters. Okay, so language has been
Yeah.
tainted over the years. There's not a single language that's 100% pure. Yeah, it is. All languages that this day are influenced by other languages, I think, due to that there are also a lot of misunderstandings to this. And I'm a firm believer that we need to listen more and not try to have an answer just to be right. To me, hearing is less than listening. Why did you hear an owl in the backyard? To are you listening to the owl in the backyard? We tend to feel attacked by other parts saying his or her point of view. What might be silly to you doesn't mean that it's silly to me backwards. There's some good points in there, but I do
Hmm.
want to make sure that you understand something. Most mainstream languages are influenced and tainted by other languages. But we have to remember that language is not just all languages are not written. All languages are not mainstream. You can't pick up Rosetta Stone or Pimsleur or some book to learn all languages. You just can't learn them. So some things are not necessarily, and it depends on what section of the world that you come from. And I think that a lot of times that's reflective of our worldview that we think with mainstream concepts and we try to use that as an indicator of how things really are globally. And that's not always the case. Now, that might make me a professional point misser with that because I do get your point. But this is one of those things to where it's just kind of like, how broad am I thinking with that when I say all things are this or all things? And they're not. They're not. It's not. It's not the case all the time. But also, what I did hit you say in here is like hearing the owl and listening to the owl. I
Yeah. I
can't
was just about to
comprehend.
touch on that.
You said what?
I was finna touch on that.
No, you got it.
So to as far as like languages, uh some being, what do you call it? And intercepted or I can't think of the word right now, but uh a lot of these, I want to say, let's call them mainstream languages, the ones that mainly deal with commerce. I can kind of feel like a lot of those languages may have been tainted, as far as injecting, slang and all this other stuff into it. I can see more of the major mainstream languages being used in that light. Now, as far as like, did you hear the owl or are you listening to the owl? I think that a lot of people, not all, got to put that disclaimer. I think a lot of people like really operate in that manner. Is like they really only operate in taking something that was said and then I don't know, somehow some type of dyslexia or something, and they flip it into what they feel that they heard. And I think that is a huge part of communication right there. And that's how do you know you need your communication needs work? Because you're not taking exactly what was said and you're able to articulate back what you just heard a few seconds ago. So I think that's a real big misnomer right there too. And then what else did you say?
Well, let's
We
look at it like this.
attacked by others. Yeah, we definitely feel attacked by others because we feel like that we either being belittled because they don't understand our point of view or they feel like that our point of view uh may be idiotic to them. Yeah, what you believe you might heard, but uh we immediately go to attacks and insults and things of that nature when it comes to, you know, what you said may have actually been prolific, but because they lack the capacity to really thoroughly grasp what you're saying and get to the meat and potatoes of what you're trying to say, they can't comprehend it. So they immediately jump to insults. I mean, that's just what it is. That's how we operate.
Well, look at it from this point of view too, right? This is one of my favorite reads.
Hmm.
For those who don't know what this book is, it's called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene.
Yes, sir.
This book has a lot of very interesting stuff in it as far as the interpretation of how to seize power in certain situations and how to put yourself into certain power positions based off of space-time ability and understanding of when you are in these situations, how you can maneuver to get the result that you're looking for. I can read any one of those laws and I can interpret it the way I interpret it because there's a lot of how I process information that's based off life experience. So I can have a conversation and I could just actually you could say something very simple like US military. I don't have to ask a question. I could just say US military and ask you what's the first thing that come to your mind. You might have a version, Jose gonna have a version, I'm gonna have a version, and all of our versions may have nothing to do with each other and they may not be any way even close to the idea that each person has in regards to their idea of the US military. But based off of your worldview and your life experience, I won't have the same view as somebody who was a veteran. Because I didn't serve, I just seen from the outside looking in. I just know people who did, and I've seen the effects of what happened after the fact. But that might not have anything to do with who they are. So somebody who went and they came back healthy, and they went and they came back fully intact and well disciplined and completely successful, versus some of the people that I know that left and came back with PTSD and other issues, my worldview of how I see it could be different, tainted, if you will, if that's the word we're going to use, based off of what my life's experience has shown me and or what my understanding has shown me. But all I did was just say US military. I didn't say anything else. Sometimes it's just that simple that context can only be defined when you start to the quality of the answer that you receive is predicated on the quality of the questions that you ask. I can ask the same question 17 ways and receive 17 different answers for the same question, all in the framing of the question. I can do the same in response, that I can give 17 different responses and get 17 different reactions for the same response.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily, it is rocket science. Let's face it. Language is rocket science. Counselors, life coaches, lawyers, certain professions have to master the art of being able to ask the right questions to get inside of somebody's head to figure out what they're trying to say actually.
Man, that could be spun so many different ways because there's you have jobs in general that are just dedicated solely to just
Customer service.
talking. Yeah, words, articulation. President to the person in the murder unit. Questioning people, trying to get a confession. That's all wordplay. To somebody working over the phone that you talking to over the phone that work at Capital One, trying to find out what's where this charge come from. You know, uh, Wordplay and being able to convey it properly like that. That is like the biggest key.
And I think that that's one of those things that we don't always look at when it comes down to how we communicate with each other. I don't think we always take into account the fact that when we are trying to communicate a point with somebody, that a great deal of the time we find ourselves only focused on our point of view.
Hmm.
A lot of times we walk into a situation, like how many people could say they honestly walked into the last conversation that they had solely with the sense of understanding? I'm only here because I'm trying to understand you better. I have no other intention but just to listen and comprehend. That every question that I ask is a follow-up question to make sure that I get you better. How often are we having conversations, and to whom are we having the conversations with, to where it's just like, hey, you know what? I don't always understand you, but I aim solely to understand you. I'm only here to ask questions so that I can get a better understanding of where you're coming from. When last time any of you guys had that point?
I can say I do that now, Mike. There's definitely been a long journey to get into this state of mind of being able to jump into a conversation like that, to have that thought process when you in a conversation. It took me a while to get there, but I move in that manner now. Let me see
I
what
think.
did I say. I can get my bad, Mike.
No, go ahead, read.
I can give you my point of view on what you're doing, regardless of what it is, but I should not make or stand in a position until I have walked on your in your shoes. Sadly, today that's all we see these days. Because you believe something should be a certain way, don't mean it is that way. So I was having a thought process to myself yesterday, and that thought process was that everybody. Have you heard the term that the world doesn't revolve around you?
Yes, many
Okay,
times.
but Jose, don't you have your own world? Like, is you, your significant other, your household, your family? Like, don't you have your own world around you? Like, Jones, don't you have your own world around? So yes, the world does revolve around you. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, you have to have that understanding that your world is also revolving around other people's world, and you have to be able to maneuver around these people and coexist with all these other worlds that's circling around you. When you go to work and you got these co-workers, there's all these different universes clumping together, but the end goal is to make the customer happy. And all of y'all got to coexist and cohabit in this building until it's time to clock out. And then you can go back to doing whatever you do over here, you know what I'm saying, to continue your world over there. So I think that if we can have great, okay, sorry when I was thinking to myself, phrase that song comes to my head. Yeah. So which is on point. But I think that if we can utilize that whole concept of being able to walk in others people's shoes and being able to be uh, some level of empathetic, to gain a better understanding of people and to see how they live their life and things of that nature. I think that I think that moving forward, our level of communication as a whole will be better because we'll be able to communicate with each other. We'll be able to know how to convey things to each other. We'll know how to get points across to each other, and we can be happy. Simple as that.
I believe that there's a joint level of responsibility that comes about to where people
Yeah.
have to take into consideration that like I said earlier, that conversation is multifaceted.
Hmm.
And in order for you to really grasp an understanding of putting yourself in a position to truly be effective in the world of communication, is the fact that you have to desire, like for instance, when Jose posts, I just use this as an example. When Jose posts a comment and then you hear him make mention of a language barrier, there's keys in there that let you know that there's a language barrier. So sometimes you have to read in between the lines
Hmm.
and go a little deeper to make sure that it's like, okay, are you articulating it the way that you want it to come off? Now, mind you, he's somebody that I know directly. That is like I've had conversations with, in English and in Spanish. So it's like I have a very good understanding of where he's coming from most times. But then again, you have to understand that sometimes things are said with emotion. Some things are emotional conversations that you're having to where the words don't always come to you the way you speaking from your feelings. You're not speaking from your logic.
Hmm.
So a lot of times that I've been upset about things, like when I was upset about the conversation I was having with you yesterday.
Hmm.
Yeah, it bothers me. It makes me feel a way because of the circumstances that the conversation was rooted in. But at the end of the day, it's like sometimes when you feel stuff, you can't help what you're feeling. You don't always know. And then the thing is that a lot of times we're trained to be quiet when we're emotional because irrational thoughts and actions generally stem from operating in an emotional place. However, I could also argue that speaking from an emotional place is the most purest form of communication because it's rooted in how you feel. So for me to open myself up in a vulnerable position and say something to somebody is when I desire to be understood the most. And the reason why there's usually adverse effects to follow when rejection and stuff comes into play and when my emotions are not dealt with properly is because of the fact that you are open, you are vulnerable at this point. Because the things that you would not normally say in a normal setting, you are now revealing to the world. And you're basically saying, I'm taking my armor off for the sake of finding peace or finding understanding or finding middle ground. Will you join me? And the rejection of that could be detrimental to how I feel about self, how I feel about you, to any
Hmm.
relationship that we're going to have for the future, if any. And it's a downward spiral.
Hmm.
So that, I mean, it's like the levels of communication and miscommunication are so vital that it's like sometimes somebody might be coming to you from a place, and just because they're calm, cool, and collective, you don't realize that they're coming to you from a place of vulnerability. That they're trying to convey something to you, and then they fly off the handle because you didn't take what they were saying serious. Well, I didn't know, because
Yeah.
my worldview says when somebody's in an emotional place, they're a little bit more erratic and a lot less composed. So I had no idea that you were pouring your heart out to me at that point in time. I wouldn't have cracked that joke had I known.
That goes back to being a good listener,
Yeah.
comprehension. And one thing that you want to be careful of when it comes to your words. I'm pretty sure y'all heard of the story, Cry Wolf, the little boy that cried wolf. You want to be careful with your words because when you have somebody that was in a vulnerable state, and I'm a correlate the two. When you have somebody that's been in a vulnerable state before, trying to open up to you, express things, and then that level of rejection comes, it causes that person to tighten up and they really start to listen and pay attention more. With that being said, the boy that cried wolf, I'm listening to you. I may respond. You cry wolf again. I'm listening to you. I may respond. You cry wolf again, I'm not gonna respond because you put me in a state to where your words are not trusting, and you putting me in a state to where I now have to put, you know what I'm saying, the armor back on. I got to put the chainmail back on. I got my shield. I got my sword. And now you causing me to lock up. And what that's happening is when you come into a real situation, it's gonna feel funny because every time you call or every time that you need to use your words, it's always in a dire of something. It's always in the need of something. It's always this, it's always that. So you want to be real careful how you using your words with people that's around you or in your life or that you're dealing with, because your words can cause that person to not come to your aid when you really need it, when you use your words and say there's a wolf outside. So I hope I was able to make that make sense. One day at work, after me losing my dad, a supervisor I had, not Jones, try to make try to hold on, so slow down, Jose. Try to ask me for help, but didn't do it in a nice way. At the moment I went off on him. Now my office manager and my other supervisor pulled me in the office and realized that I was emotional. We should never have conversations while one, yeah, yeah. It's real hard to try not to have conversations when you're emotional, because when you're in that emotional state, that's when you want to be vulnerable and to get that other person that you're talking to understand where you at for real.
You know,
It's real hard.
the rough thing about that is the fact that when I came to him in that situation, I could see it in him. And again, because of the relationship that we've always had, I can look, something ain't right. Come here. Come on. Get out of here. Because you're going to blow if you don't get off of this floor. I can look at you and I can tell. But I know you well enough and how composed that you are in most situations. I can just see the fact that this isn't going to go. You should not be here. You shouldn't even be in this building right now.
Mm.
And sometimes you have to, again, going back to knowing your clientele, you know what his dad meant to him. It's like his best friend. Before I even knew what was going on, you could kind of see certain things in people's face to where it's just like, oh no. Hey man, come here. Come on. No, please just come with me. I don't even, if you don't feel like saying it, don't. But I need you to not be here, because the consequences of what can happen if this volcano erupts is far more detrimental than anything else at the moment. Most importantly is you don't need to be you don't need to be here. Let's get him away from this situation as soon as humanly possible and isolate the situation, and you come to in your own time. And a lot of times, like, that even ties into the concept of effective leadership. And in certain companies or certain structures, that leadership style that understands the emotions of their employees and understands that it has an empathetic approach toward their employees, it is so underappreciated in the workforce that people are so busy driving for, I want results, I want this, I want this, I want this, which, again, that's what we're in business to do. We're in business to get results. But the people that you are asking to do things, they are people too. They're not machines. So at some point in time, you have to understand, like, hey, especially when it's one of the people that always go above and beyond. When you know something, hey, you got those people that it's like they got an emergency every 15 minutes. Some people, boy, they can't stop having an emergency. Everything is an emergency. Mm-hmm. And some people, I had employees to where some of them had special needs children. Someone were caring for elderly parents, and they were really in a bad space to where, man, like, everything in my life really is bad. And you had to understand that, because those were always the ones that went above and beyond for you, because that was their distraction. That's how they coped, by going out and just throwing their lives into their work. But
Yeah,
you won't
stepping
know
out
if
of their world for a second.
you said what?
Stepping out of their world for a second.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to be willing to meet somebody where they are in order to understand what is going on. Maybe just on the most basic level, but when you know and you know how to deal with certain situations based off the information that you have available to you, you will understand that sometimes, okay, maybe I need to push a little bit more over here and get this guy a break that always go above and beyond for me. Hey, listen, I know you got something that you need to go take care of. Go ahead and take a hike. I'll take care of it for you. Are you sure? I mean, I'm willing to do it now. Go ahead. Get out of there.
And that plenty times.
Yeah, like, hey man, you didn't miss 4 of your kids' baseball games or 4 of your kids' basketball games or 4 track meets and stuff. Going, no, you're not missing today. Go be in them bleachers. Go ahead. I'll take care of it.
Yeah. You right, Jose. He knew how to communicate and we need to practice. Like like communication is a sport.
Mm. Mm. Communication is a sport.
It's a sport, dog. Like
Right.
being able to convince, being able to close a deal, being able to get a contract, being able to negotiate, like insert here. It's a sport. Being able to use your words to get something done. you know. But man, we are hour and 2 minutes. You want to keep going, or we good?
You said what?
We are hour and two. You want to keep going, or we good?
Nah, as I got to go to work early tonight. No, unfortunately, that's overnight, folks. We it literally wake up from your nap, get on the podcast, hop in the shower, and go to work. So, say we can communicate, but we can't have the expectations of people hearing us, listening to us, because they can hear us all day long. Like I'm making sounds, but if you're not comprehending the words that are coming out of my mouth, then it's like that's a whole different fight.
Yeah.
Hearing me is when you got your AirPods in and you're trying to purposely ignore the fact that I'm speaking to you. Listening to me is I hear what you're saying, but I don't care what you're saying. Because I believe what I believe, I hear what I hear, I know what I know, and I'm good on what you got to say. Some people are like that. And we have to also take into consideration that one of the most effective methods of communication, I'm gonna touch on this point, then we're gonna get up out of here, is that one of the most effective aspects of communication is knowing when to throw in the towel. Knowing when something is a dead mission. Knowing when I don't have to prove a thing. Some people don't get that. Some people feel like everything is I just gotta try, I gotta put forth all the effort. No, you don't. No, you don't. Sometimes, really and truly, the biggest problem that you have is your desire to try to convince people to see things your way. The one thing about facts is that they'll still be a fact regardless of who believes it. Regardless of, like, this is a glass bottle. Just because you want to argue with me about the type of glass or what it was made out of versus a different type of glass, that is all yours. I have no desire to argue with you about whether or not this is glass because it's not plastic. Sometimes you just got to know. It's just like, you know what? All right. As you say, you got to say, you got it.
You got it.
Like this is the iPhone. You can argue with me all day long about whether or not Samsung make the cameras or who makes the motherboards and who makes the chip that they use, the M1s, M2. People can argue with me all day long about it, but at the same token, it's not going to make me go buy a Samsung. Could care less. I'm still going to have an Apple 15, 16, 17, and 18, and it ain't going to make me no difference. So that's what I mean as far as understanding that sometimes it's just not even worth Sometimes it's not even worth acknowledging certain points that are not rooted in anything of value. Certain conversations you don't even have to take because there's really no point. You gain nothing from it, you lose nothing from it. You can argue, like, I mean, we could sit back and we could talk about who is the greatest boxer of all time all day long. I gain nothing from it. So if nothing else, for just the sake of entertaining myself with conversation, it is really who's the best basketball player, Michael Jordan, LeBron James. Who cares, really? Who
Yeah,
has?
I mean, then at the end of the day, like, is any of y'all seeing LeBron or Mike's money? Yeah,
I
are
mean,
they
it's good.
staying sending you to school? And it's great convo, but at the end of the day, what are you getting out of it?
I mean, it's empty banter. And
Yes,
again, it's like if
worthless.
you're into, if I'm convinced that Michael Jordan is the greatest, I'm never going. There's nothing you can tell me. There's no stat you can throw at me to tell me that Michael Jordan was the greatest. If I told you Kobe was the greatest, there's nothing that you could say to me at all to convince me that Kobe Bryant wasn't the greatest. Period.
That's your belief, and that's your right to stand on that
Yeah.
for sure.
So it's like whatever facts that I use to justify my position in something like this is no different than how we talk about the religion conversation. If you are a Muslim and you believe in Islam and that's what you stand by, you have done you've done all of what you need to do in order to justify why this applies to you. And due to that, you are now tied to that. And there's nothing that I can say that's going to take you otherwise until you have an awakening that takes you into a different direction that tells you, hey, maybe I should question this thing that I've been married to for XYZ. I could tell you, hey man, look, I understand that you make money in tech and contract fulfillment and everything else like that, but man, you really should get into selling used cars. And then you sit here and you look at your bank statements and stuff like, all right, yeah, I hear you. I got you. Used cars? Yeah, what's the margin on that? Markup? Yeah, bet. Hey, we'll talk more about that later. Yeah, absolutely. Hang
Mhm.
up the phone. Get off my phone, idiot. He may be who was your favorite, not the greatest then. Again, it's like that's the point. And in communication, that the greatest is a concept that lives inside of the individual. To somebody, Floyd Mayweather is the greatest boxer. To somebody was Mike Tyson, although Mike Tyson lost before. Somebody is Muhammad Ali, although Muhammad Ali done got knocked out a couple of times before. No matter who you say or what you say or who you give credit to for anything, it is all based off of a belief. And when
Mhm.
you argue in belief, it's pointless because you believe it. And whatever statistical research that you have, whether flawed or otherwise, is not going to change anything unless that person willfully decides, maybe I should look more into that. There's
Yeah,
certain things that are epiphanies to
be
people.
open minded about it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some things that it's like, hey, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Like I've had conversations with people who have openly stated that they didn't like black people. I
Mm.
have had conversations with people who have openly stated that they didn't like black people. And it's because of the fact that they grew up in an area to where there was no black people. So only thing that they knew about black people is what they saw on the internet or what they saw on the news. When you live 30, 40 minutes outside of a major city and all of the crime in the inner city has a disproportionate amount of black people posted up on the screen, and that's all that you see. And to some people, it makes you fear the idea of being close to people like that. And then you get into close contact with somebody, it's like, wait a minute, you ain't nothing like the guys that I saw on the news or the rappers or these guys or those guys. Man, maybe maybe my belief or what I've been taught by people maybe is not true.
Mhm.
Because I mean, let's face it, majority of the wrong that I've seen happen has not been at the hands of white people; it's been at the hands of other black folks. And in the white community, the majority of the crime that they've seen happen was from other white people. And in the
Yeah.
Hispanic community, most of the crime that's happening is caused by other Hispanic people.
Yeah, but they never portray it that way.
Well, because it makes good media, it makes good news. This is what
Absolutely.
it is.
That's what America does. That's like one of our products. Like we manufacture media.
Anyway,
Jose, next show, difference between belief and facts. Got you. Got you.
drop a bomb on that.
Indubitably, sir.
You
Got
get a
you.
bomb. You get a bomb. Everybody get a bomb.
So understand that, well, experts believe 70 to 93% of communication is nonverbal. I'm going to just leave you with understanding that sometimes silence can say more than enough than what needs to be said. And we need to exercise that enough because your body language will let that person know how you feel, what you thinking, and how they need to act and move around you. So I just leave you with that. That's all I got.
And
We
I
talked about everything else.
And I ain't got nothing to say. I'm being silent.
Got
All right, guys. Thank you guys for tuning into the Extraordinary Man podcast. As always, thank you guys for y'all comments. Thank you for y'all time, y'all likes, y'all mentions, and everything that y'all do under the sun. For all of our subscribers or soon to be subscribers, y'all know what that link is down at the bottom. Make sure you click that link, put your cell phone up to the screen, go to the little camera function. As soon as that QR code pops up, you take you right to the YouTube channel. You click the like, share, and you click the subscribe button, and then you hit the little bell on the side of the subscribe button so that you can get access to all of our notifications.
Do it now. Not now, but right now. Do it now.
Don't make me say please, because I will, and I'm not playing with y'all. I will say please. Don't make me do it. Now, as of right now, we're working on that, Jose. I'm gonna call you in a little bit and let you know the situation with that, but it's being worked on.
Still trying to get me merch. Still trying to get me merch. So yeah, we got things in the making.
So, with all of that being said, guys, thank you guys for tuning in. As always, I'm Phil Jones, Mike Jones. Have you guys know me personally, professionally, and I am the host of the Extraordinary Man podcast. And you guys know the co-hostess with the mostest who was out there making a gang of money. And that's why he got here 3.5 minutes behind schedule. It's okay because I was having audio issues before then. State your name.
What's going on, everybody? Nah, it's Midas. Make sure you put a king in front of that. Let's go.
Hey, the bomb want to work on time for you. I think you got a delayed bomb reaction for me. You a hater.
No, I don't. I promise I don't.
All right, y'all. Peace.